Hello and welcome back to Shocks Talks. It is January 16th, 2025, and it feels like something big is about to happen. There have been rumors of big movements towards disclosure occurring this weekend, which is the weekend before the inauguration. So, where we are in time is Trump is about to come back into office. We have people like Stephen Greer talking about big things that he's going to release to the public. And like I said before, I'm kind of like, all right, we'll see. We'll see about whatever Greer has going on. But we also have Ross Coulthart from News Nation talking about a huge story that is going to be released this weekend on Saturday, the 18th. And they are choosing to release this story right before the inauguration just to make a big splash and a big point to let everybody know it's time for the public to know the truth. So he said he's been working on this for over a year. He said something like it's along the lines of the David Grush revelations and how big of an impact that made on, this fight for transparency and UFO disclosure. But Grush was someone who had to claim, at least, to have been a sort of secondhand witness, not a direct. He hadn't been directly in contact with this foreign tech or non-human intelligence, although Coulthart mentioned that he might actually have firsthand experience. He's just not allowed to talk about it. But the witnesses that are coming forward now, they do have their own firsthand experience with these secret programs, crash retrieval programs, exotic tech or alien tech or non-human tech or whatever you want to call it, but these ships or tic tacs or orbs or eggs or saucers or whatever it may be, we're going to be hearing a lot more from credible witnesses who have firsthand experience and who have been verified by multiple other credible witnesses and people that have worked with them who can speak to their character and things like that. So let's keep our eyes peeled and our ears open for news around UFO and UAP disclosure this weekend, January 18th. I'll be watching News Nation to see what they share. And I posted a link below of an interview where a witness mentions an egg-shaped craft that he came into contact with. He was only 150 feet away, so that's a first-hand witness. And we've heard about egg-shaped craft before, and I've talked about it on Shocks Talks in other episodes. This is one of the types of things that people see. So that interview is linked below. We'll keep our eyes on News Nation this weekend. And there are a couple other big things going on right now just to ground us into this moment in reality. One thing that I'm feeling really interested in and excited about is this new notion of digital refugees and basically digital immigrants. And this terminology is coming from conversations that are happening around TikTok being banned. So it's just an interesting moment when all these things are happening at the same time. We have a new president about to take office. We have this huge ban on TikTok that is stirring up a lot of emotion in the public and creating big surprises right now. And then we also have a current fascination spreading around this new podcast called the Telepathy Tapes. And multiple people have sent me this podcast saying, you should check this out. This is right up your alley. And it totally is. And we're going to talk about that today too. So first, we'll just cover the TikTok news really quickly. Basically, the ban is supposed to go into effect on the 19th. So just right after this big maybe whistleblower revelation and right before the inauguration day. So that's just like everything's clustered together in time right now. And what's going to happen, we're not really sure. but it looks like it is going through as of today. And so a lot of people on the app are saying goodbye to each other. They're reflecting on the fun times that they've had, but also what a powerful and incredibly empowering experience it has been for people to create on this platform. And what's interesting now is that instead of leaving this platform and heading over to other platforms like X or Facebook or Instagram, everyone is basically, in their own words, trolling the US government and trolling Musk and Zuckerberg. So people do not like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg very much right now, and they don't want to use their clunky platforms, and they feel dissatisfied with the algorithms, and they're finding this new joy and freedom in TikTok. And even though everyone's also joking around about the whole like Chinese spy notion that this app is really just spying on everyone, because the people don't really care, because the value that they're getting out of it outweighs any fear that the government has. And so instead of migrating to these other US platforms, they're all choosing to migrate to a Chinese app known as Red Note, or I'm going to try to pronounce it right, Xiaohongshu or Xiaohongshu. And this platform is similar to TikTok. And in the conversations that are happening on TikTok today, everyone is just joking about how they're all learning Mandarin so quickly. They're all being welcomed by Chinese people. People are connecting and finding that they have a lot more in common than they thought. It's already bursting the bubble of US perceptions about Chinese people in general, and many cultural, um, I guess, not just cultural critics, but people who study culture and are sort of sitting on the sidelines and watching this action happening are saying that this is like a huge moment, almost along the lines of the Berlin Wall coming down. And that's an interesting reference, because I've also heard astrologers referring to this time astrologically as similar to that time. So a lot is happening. And it's funny because the idea of a digital immigrant or a TikTok refugee is pretty new. This concept is just happening now. And I think we're going to start to see a lot more of this. And all of the people online on TikTok are talking about the fact that if they lose access to this Chinese app for some reason, because that feels like the next step in control, that they might say, no, you can't really be on here, or they're kind of blowing up the app with their presence. It's too many users and it wasn't made for that. And so restrictions might be put on this Red Note app as well. But basically, what we're seeing is that the people are willing to flow to the next app, and they're saying things like, we don't care who made it, like, we're going to go somewhere else. We don't want to go to Facebook. We don't want to go to Instagram Reels. We want to go somewhere else where we feel free and we can do what we want to do. So it's like energetically, spiritually, emotionally, there's this big stirring of energy right now. And basically, what we are seeing is people are hungry for the connection that they are able to find on the internet. With TikTok, people have been able to expand beyond their physical locales and share in culture and knowledge in ways that are profound and radical. And it's truly a powerful thing to see people taking creative expression into their own hands in a way that wasn't possible before the internet and before these apps. Even things like YouTube and Instagram and platforms that came before TikTok, where people could post video content, we started to see a major disruption in the levels of control that the mass media was holding. We saw that dissolving. We saw people's interests shifting. And basically, this all comes back to power and control. So I believe I linked it here, but let me double check. In the last episode, I linked a Richard Dolan uh, lecture. And Dolan has been talking a lot lately about all of this disclosure stuff and really what is it all about. And even though we don't have all the answers yet and we don't know exactly what's going on, what we do know is that there are groups and individuals who have more knowledge and more evidence, and they are holding that back from the public. That's at the crux of all of this stuff. And there's a reason for that, and the reason is control. And so I think one of the things that Dolan does a really good job of highlighting again and again over the years in his work is this struggle between those who want to access truth and information and those who seek to keep it from us. And so I think let's just take that concept of, people who want the power to connect and the power to know what is true and freedom and reality versus people and institutions that seek to limit that access and limit our ability to be these free agents in reality, creating and understanding. People who seek to dampen our awareness and control our choices basically through manipulation tactics, disinformation, and the hoarding of knowledge and resources. So we're dealing with these opposing forces, okay? And we're going to see that dynamic at play in many areas of our anomalous studies. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is telepathy. And once I get through this little section on this new podcast, the Telepathy Tapes, we're going to link back. Hopefully my brain can remember. We're going to come back to this same dynamic and we're going to tie it all in at the end of this episode. So if you're new to Shocks Talks, the way I've laid out this channel is I created a foundation for us to be able to have even deeper and more nuanced conversations around these anomalous happenings as we move through time together. So we're currently in 2025 and I've now started a playlist called Shocks Talks 2025. But before this, what I did is I had a UFO deep dive season and a psychic season, and then I had a little couple of episodes about abduction, took a break and then came back. So we're going to get more into abduction, but what really matters is that seasons 1 and 2 are your foundation. So if you're new to this stuff, go back to the beginning or at least jump around and check out some of those episodes because those are really in depth where I'm sharing research and resources. I'm sharing the science and the perspectives that have shaped my awareness of this topic in the most beneficial ways. And I'm laying that out so that we can all have the conversation now about things that are happening today. So if you're already up on all of that, then we can just start where we're at and move forward from here. But if you're new to this, just check out some of season 1 and 2 if you have the time. So let's talk about the telepathy tapes. The telepathy tapes are a series of stories that center nonverbal autistic people and prove their telepathic abilities. Now, if you're like me and you've been studying this for a long time, there's nothing surprising about the fact that this is occurring. But what is absolutely thrilling to me is the fact that we now have a whole new body of evidence to support theories of reality like Tom Campbell's theory of reality, which I talk about a lot on this channel. So it's cool to watch or to listen to this story unfold in this podcast and to go on this journey of understanding that is very similar to the same journey of understanding that I'm taking us on and so many others are doing. And we have to go on these journeys again and again. Repetition is important because of the way that our culture has been shaped, and especially education and our notions around the nature of reality. We have deeply ingrained neural pathways that are limiting our ability to understand truth. And in order to carve out new neural pathways and a new framework that allows us to think new thoughts and understand truth, we have to use repetition, because that's how neural pathways are formed. So I highly recommend listening to the telepathy tapes, starting at the beginning and going on that journey. Because even if you already know, and even if none of this is new to you, it's beautifully produced and presented, and there's nuance to the story, and there are these little details that were just like beautiful shooting stars in my mind. I could just feel more synapses firing, and it was so exciting and so fun to go along for that ride. So please go and listen to that. This podcast was created by Dickens, and I've linked the website below, and you can listen to it on Spotify or on YouTube. And if you do listen to it and you're a skeptic and you want even more evidence, you can go to the website and see more in-depth videos of the tests that they did to prove this telepathy. But from here on out, I'm going to be talking about it. So this is a little spoiler alert. If you want to go listen to it, come back to this episode afterward. But starting now, I'm going to drop some information from that podcast. So be prepared for some spoilers if you haven't listened yet. So one of the things I thought was really profound was the statement that one of these nonverbal autistic people made, and they're able to make statements because they have devices that they can type on in order to convey words. So some of them can just press one letter at a time to spell out like whatever word they're trying to say. Others can do what's called assisted typing, where a therapist or a helper or a family member or person kind of supports their body to help them type what they need to type. And some of them can do their own typing. Now, many of these people were trapped in this body that didn't allow for them to communicate, and the people around them who love them were told by doctors and professionals that basically there's no one in there, there's nothing going on, and that was wrong. And so that's one of the biggest revelations of this show, and it's pretty intense to feel that in the heart and just to absorb that, just how wrong we can be with our science and our medicine. But what people are discovering is that there's actually, not only is there a lot going on in there, there's more going on in there than even most humans have going on, because these people are able to, in Tom Campbell's words, access data from the database and connect non-physically. One of the things that one of these people said in episode 3, about 22 minutes in, if you want to hear this, is a quote: "You don't get the kind of gifts that I have if you lie." And this is referring to the gift of telepathy. And it's a little bomb that was dropped that they moved on from pretty quickly, but it stuck in my mind, and I wanted to uplift it here for our discussion because this is so interesting to me. This is so similar to ancient teachings, especially coming from the yogic tradition, around this idea of being aligned with truth as a path to expanding your abilities in reality. And the purity of spirit that these people have is undeniable, and something that we humans who speak verbally have a bad habit of is basically, I'm going to call it bullshitting. But we don't always speak in alignment with our truth. We don't always speak our thoughts. We don't always keep a clear and open system. We create many, many layers to cover up things that we don't want to reveal about ourselves, about the way we feel, and about what we're thinking. And we use lying and we use masking and we use acting as ways of navigating reality. And this could be another like 3 hour long discussion, so I just want to touch on it and keep moving. But basically, I think there is something there for each individual to examine and work with on our own. And for me, it was a point in my life when I started realizing how much masking I was doing and how many layers of personality I had created on top of myself in order to just function in reality and to survive. And there's psychological reasons that we do that. And there's cultural reasons and there's safety reasons. And sometimes you need to hold your tongue just to be safe. Other times you need to navigate, for example, a workplace situation, and it would not be appropriate to blurt out every thought that you're thinking at every moment. So it's on each of us to figure out how we want to navigate this. But for me personally, my goal in life is to continue to move towards a more authentic expression of self that aligns with my inner being. So my inner self and my outer self are as aligned as possible. And I'm speaking truthfully whenever I'm speaking. And if I need to hold my tongue, I'm holding my tongue. And if I'm doing that, it's not just out of insecurity or out of a need to conform, but rather it is part of me navigating that moment in reality. So it's like sometimes it's what I have to do to stay safe. Sometimes it's what I have to do to exist in reality in a practical way. So I thought that was a really interesting little nugget. And then another thing that I picked up on was this concept that for these telepathic people, in the episode, in the Telepathy Tapes podcast, they mentioned that anxiety literally cuts off parts of the brain. People's negativity and hatefulness have a huge impact on being able to hear. And I'm putting "hear" in quotations because we're talking about consciousness hearing, not mental hearing, not physical hearing, but your consciousness accessing information. So some of these nonverbal autistic folks, they require different things to help them function. A weighted blanket is an example that is used in the podcast. And crystals were also brought up. And then physical touch was another thing that helped ground these people into their bodies and helped them to be able to function better. And this brings up the whole conversation around like society and how it's unacceptable to be different and to need different things and to express yourself differently, and how we just have to keep expanding our notions of what's right and wrong and what's acceptable or not acceptable. It should be perfectly fine for people like this to walk around with a blanket all day at school if that's what helps them function better. Why would we stop that from happening, you know? So it brings up this question of like, why do we force each other into these boxes and roles? Why can't we make more space? Because this is an extreme version of people who are very different from maybe people like you and me. But at the same time, we are all existing on a spectrum, and many of us do require things like physical grounding, contact with crystals or rocks or the earth, or we need to put pillows around our heads to be able to focus. I mean, it's interesting. They talked about when some of these kids are accessing their telepathic abilities, they go and pile up blankets and pillows all around them to kind of block out some of the noise. It's almost like a gesture, a symbol that helps them to get into that, maybe what we would call an altered state, to be able to do what they need to do. But it quiets the signals that are coming into their physical body, and that helps them to do what they do. And this is very similar to what we've all learned about meditation. Meditation is a chance for us to quiet the mind, the mental chatter, so that consciousness can flow more freely. And I'm the kind of person that when I lay down at night, I put a pillow up against each ear because it just helps me relax. And it's like I'm blocking that physical signal, and that allows me to exit my physical awareness more quickly and easily. I'm also the kind of person that does really well with physical grounding, loving touch with like an animal or a person that I love and trust. And I completely understand needing to cancel out the noise, because when I'm in a crowd of people or if I'm at work all day around other people physically, I feel pretty overwhelmed by the interference patterns that I'm picking up on. It's like I'm hyper aware. I've always been very observant and perceptive and psychic, and I am hyper aware of all of the energies around me. These kids and people in the podcast, the telepathy tapes, they also mention that they're not only telepathic with their parents, teachers, or friends, but they hear everyone's thoughts. So, what's going on here? Let's examine this through the lens of Tom Campbell. So, there's nothing surprising here if you are familiar with Tom Campbell's work. And for those who are not, I'm just going to read a quick blurb from his website, which I've linked below, to reground us in the essence of his theory. So, here we go. Consciousness is the fundamental reality. The physical world is an illusion, a virtual reality that only exists in our minds. We are individuated units of consciousness, immortal, interconnected parts of a larger consciousness system. We choose to be players in the virtual reality game called Life on Earth, set in a virtual universe computed by the system to aid our consciousness evolution. In this game, we are the choice makers for our virtual bodies. We use our free will to make choices that express our quality of consciousness. Our quality is accurately reflected by the intent motivating each choice. Selfish, fear-based versus selfless, love-based. Our goal, to learn from the outcome of our choices in order to grow up and evolve the quality of our consciousness from fear to love. So again, he's grounding his theory in a purpose, our goal. So our goal is to learn from the outcome of our choices in order to grow up and evolve the quality of our consciousness from fear to love. By evolving our individual consciousness quality from one round of the game to the next, we advance the evolution of the entire consciousness system. So you may or may not subscribe to this theory. That's fine. I'm not trying to push anything on anyone. I'm simply sharing something that I find extremely compelling. And it also is the same as many religions, many spiritual philosophies, and many people have come to this conclusion on their own. And the thing I liked about listening to the telepathy tapes is that, you know, people who are new to this, they see the phenomena at play, they see telepathy is happening, they prove it through scientific testing, and then their minds are blown, because what they can't quite reconcile is how this is happening within the framework of materialist views. So they are trying to approach this and understand, is there something going on that's physical that we can measure? Are people sending thoughts? Is there a field or a wave that we haven't been able to see or detect, but it exists? And they're getting closer to the truth, but they're still missing the mark, according to Tom Campbell's theory, because what they're missing is that consciousness, which is fundamental, is outside of all of that physical stuff. And they even talk about this on the podcast. They say how the deeper they go in their research and into their studies, they start to ask the question, basically, is consciousness fundamental? And they start getting to the same place. So it's like back to the whole truth is one, paths are many philosophy. It's like, to get to the truth, you're going to get there whichever way you go. You can go down any path and you're going to get to the same truth. And that's what's exciting to me, is that truth is fundamental. Truth is at the root of everything. And it may be a different way that we get there, but anyone who's seeking it is going to get there. And so these people are starting to realize that telepathy can happen across distances. It can happen when they're testing them in a submarine or a Faraday cage. Animals can be telepathic. They outline some research around animal telepathy, and not just telepathy, which is communication, mind to mind communication, but things like downloads. So one of the teachers starts talking about how, our brain and the way that we have our body and brain interface with consciousness is similar to like phones with apps. And some of these autistic people are, and savants, because this woman on the podcast is studying specifically savants, so people that have like unusual talents that are inexplicable. For example, you're just born and you know how to play classical piano, but you never studied it. So some people are just imbued with all of this ability or knowledge. And it's like they get these big downloads and all of a sudden they know all about this certain thing. And others, it seems like they're able to get a whole application installed where maybe they have a skill or they have knowledge and ability. And so this concept in modern spiritual communities has become a colloquialism where people talk about downloads. It's like all of a sudden they unlocked a huge burst of knowledge within themselves. But within Tom Campbell's framework for reality and his theory, these things are all possible and kind of just every day. Like this is like, yeah, this can happen. We're in a consciousness system. And once you are accessing that directly, you can access all kinds of information. So you can connect to other units of consciousness. And that's exactly what these nonverbal autistic people are doing in a place that they call the Hill. So in, I think it's episode 3 or 4, they start to talk about this, and this just blew my mind. It excited me so much because, again, like I said, it's nothing new, but it's new evidence to illustrate something that Tom Campbell has talked about again and again, which he refers to as a virtual chat room. So when he speaks of what some people refer to as out-of-body experiences, he helps us all to understand that each one of us has the potential to access data from the data stream and to connect with consciousness beyond our physical constraints. And one of those ways is to create a virtual space where people meet in their minds and can share information and actually come back into their bodies or into their typical physical functions, and they can share that information and verify that that really happened. And that's what's going on in this podcast. These young autistic people are meeting in a place that they call the Hill, which is kind of just like a location. It's not a physical location in physical reality, but it's kind of a almost like an internet address. It's like a place that they choose to meet. And when they go there, they can talk, they can share information, they can teach each other things, and they can do this across the world. So they're actually meeting with people in other countries, and they have relationships and they have um, discourse in this place, and they were able to be together because they couldn't connect physically through their physical bodies with everyone else in reality the way we can all talk and share. And they were so desperate and longing for that connection that it's like somehow their consciousness just found a way, which is incredibly beautiful and heartwarming and just so powerful. So I bring this up because ultimately my goal in life is to be able to have these abilities, and for as many of us as possible to have these abilities to connect beyond the physical. I have a really good friend. Well, actually, unfortunately, I have multiple friends who have lost loved ones, partners and friends and family members, um, before their time, you could say. And so these people become quite obsessed with trying to connect to reality beyond the physical. And I totally understand why, because they sense it and they know in their soul that that other person is still somewhere and they want to reach them and they want to connect to them. So they begin studying out of body and near death experiences. Other people who have had, for example, like a UFO experience or contact with non-human intelligence or aliens or spiritual religious figures, also begin to explore the capabilities of consciousness to help them understand their experiences that they went through. And so they seek out more information and frameworks for understanding reality, because let's just call it the small view of reality is just not enough. The materialist view is not enough, and it does not explain everything. But why does it work, and why are people so attached to it, and why do they cling to it? Well, because it does describe a subset of the greater reality, and it does a good job at describing the rule set of the subset of the larger reality. So Tom Campbell calls it PMR, physical matter reality. That's the little bubble of reality that we are primarily focused in. And Newtonian physics do a good job of describing the rule set of physical matter reality. But just outside of that, beyond it, and maybe even within it and all around it, there's this other larger reality, and that's the consciousness-based reality. And so I think one of the big goals of our spiritual evolution, in my perspective, is to, number one, recognize what's going on here and just have that base level understanding that there's more to reality than what materialist reality would have us believe. And number two, we need to gain our own direct firsthand experience of that truth. And in order to do that, we all have to access our psi abilities, our paranormal abilities, our extrasensory perception, and things along those lines. So that's why there is this intersection that we're at between ufology, alien experiences, spiritual philosophies, and religion. um, Current trends in our internet that we're creating, because that functions as a kind of mirror to this consciousness reality. And we're going to go right back into that. And telepathy and remote viewing. And this is where we exist in between all of these things. And I think it's on each of us to figure out, how can we continue to gather evidence, and I'm talking about our own personal experiential evidence of these greater concepts. And so that's why meditation and working with our minds and bodies and breath are foundational to being able to jump out into these other experiences. And I'm still pretty new at all of this, even though I've been doing it a little bit since the beginning of this life and probably before. But there's still so much to learn, and there's so much to unlearn. So I will say, for anyone who wants to make progress in these things, that if you stay committed to your path of learning and practice, like practical application of the techniques, and you're consistent, all that it takes is commitment, consistency over time, you will see progress. You will see results, and it's really cool. For me personally, I have had anomalous experiences throughout my life. I have had a great interest in specifically telepathy and psychic abilities, because I have a lot of experiences around that in particular. And so I'm constantly trying to understand it through my own experience and through the stories that others share. And the more that I focus on it, and the more that I learn about it, and the more that I stay aligned with my truth and my spiritual North Star, the more psychic I become. So there are things that I might never share on this podcast, and maybe as time goes on, I'll share more. But what I will say is that it's real, and that you can absolutely 100% access data from the database beyond your physical environment, beyond your physical form. And I think once you start to have those experiences, then naturally the next thing that follows is like wanting to gain a little more control around that stuff. For example, some people have spontaneous out of body experiences, but that's very different than being able to consciously create that experience at any given moment. So I'm at the phase with my own practice where I'm trying to wrangle some more willpower into the mix and be able to continue moving forward with these experiences in the most meaningful way for myself and for the greatest good of all. So, bringing it back to the whole TikTok conversation, I just think it's really interesting that in this Telepathy Tapes podcast, these people are going to a virtual space where they can be free and they can be together and they can share in connection that really matters to them. And right now, today, as we are watching people migrating from TikTok over to RedNote, there's a lot of chitter chatter going on still on the TikTok app where people are talking about why this matters to them, what they are getting from these communities, and how they will continue to seek out the places that they want to be together, regardless of who's trying to control it. So they're basically saying this matters to us, and all of you people who are trying to control these platforms, you better get out of the way because we're going to find a way one way or the other. Now, of course, those intelligent groups who are in power, who are controlling the platforms, will probably continue to try to predict everyone's next move, and it's this whole chess match, and it may be this never-ending, almost like game of chasing people. You go over there, we're going to come there and follow you, or like you leave us, we're going to create a new platform and lure you over here and try to get you here. You know, that all that stuff's going to be going on forever because that's just the ego nature of reality until it shifts. But what I think is powerful about this is that it's a metaphor for what we're really truly deeply craving on another level, which is connection via consciousness. And how cool would it be if everyone could flee TikTok and migrate to a virtual realm where no one is monitoring the chat and no one is in control of how much information we want to share and what way we want to share it in, and we are able to be together in a soulful way that feels nourishing and allows for us to grow in ways that we need to grow, and it provides us with support and love. I mean, connection is important, and that's why we're here. I think we're not just here to have an individual experience, we're here together. And so it's just beautiful to me and interesting that we're seeing that reflected in our current technological landscape and in our virtual realms. And that to me, it really points to a deeper desire, which is that we want to be able to access the larger consciousness system. And the internet we have is just a metaphor for that, because if we could just bypass that altogether, I mean, I love it and I think it's great. But if we could just access data from the database directly and feel confident in that ability, I mean, it would be a huge game changer. It's definitely a lower carbon footprint. So I'm going to leave it on that note. It's a really exciting time in reality. Fascinating stuff going on. And I think we're going to hear a lot more on the UAP and UFO front this weekend. So I'll be tuning in January 18th, News Nation, Ross Coulthart, see what he's got to say, what whistleblowers are coming forward. And we will continue to meet together here in this virtual space to discuss these things. And I would love to hear from you in the comments if you have checked out the telepathy tapes, if you have been following the UAP UFO news and have a hot tip for me. What do you think about all this TikTok stuff? And also, because tomorrow is my birthday, I would like to request that if you would be so kind to give me a little birthday gift. Give me a birthday gift in the form of a like or a subscribe. But better yet, If you could share this channel with somebody who you think would be interested in these topics, I would like to grow my channel and I would like to have that as my birthday present. So if you're able to do that, I appreciate it. If you're not, I'm just glad you listened. So thank you so much for taking the time, and I'll see you next time on Shocks Talks.